I'm absolutely thrilled that Paul could come out today. As he said, he used to miss my classes. What is it, 5 years ago?
I think I heard Paul with that statement.
No.
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah.
5 years ago, but he never missed a meeting we had with Kevin Newman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think when I was at the MBET program, I must have interviewed hundreds of students, dealt with hundreds of students, but it's not often you actually continue a professional relationship with students after they graduate. And it's not often you can remember the projects they worked on,
Yeah.
and it's not often you can remember them missing class. So Paul, Paul did MBET when?
So it's version 7, the 09-2010 overlap
Okay.
kind of year. Yeah.
So MBET, as you know, is a similar program to MDI with perhaps a slightly more focus on entrepreneurship. So what they did was, for the final term, just like yourselves, they would do a project or a practicum, and I forget which one.
Clip, the mobile app with David Opierski.
Oh, okay.
The one I did.
And then with the, you've probably heard me talk about the Shakespeare app. Paul was actually the main person working with Kevin Newman on that. And it was a fantastic idea, it would have made a lot of money, but
Yeah.
like a lot of startups. And you've been involved with all our startups since? And you're
A little bit, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about that, but it was kind of like helping Kevin out a little bit, and then post MBET, did a little bit around continuing our practicum. So I worked on it for 6 months, 7 months after that, and kind of fizzled away.
So Paul is in the business development side of Deloitte, no? Is that fair to say?
It's like, part of what we do is, I mean, we have to do business development, but we also have to deliver as a consultant type thing, so kind of wear both of those hats to a certain extent.
So a lot of people, when they think of Deloitte, they think of accountants, CAs, CPA, whatever, but actually a large part of the practice is the non-accounting side.
Yeah.
And rather than take up your valuable time, why don't I just let you
Sure.
start?
Yeah, sure. And I do want to, maybe I don't want to talk too much about myself, but I'll talk a little bit about myself, and then I just want to kind of maybe spend 5 or 10 minutes kind of getting to know you guys. But kind of on the heels of that. Thanks for the intro, Paul. Appreciate it. Really excited to be here today. Love kind of coming back to talk to classes and whatnot. Born in Hamilton, started out at the University of Windsor, doing a Bachelor of Commerce degree. Nothing technical really about it at all, and was sort of really interested in going down the finance path. I was fortunate. I went to Windsor because I wanted co-op experience, and I wanted kind of to get my hands dirty in whatever it was I was going to do in sort of business. So I was fortunate enough to get a job at a bank at the time as a co-op job, and they gracefully kept me on in a part-time role while I was going through school, which was good for beer money at night. But it kind of helped me at the end of my time at Windsor, because I graduated because of my co-op term. I kind of graduated in the summer, and I graduated. I literally left class like a week before Lehman Brothers went down in the summer of '08, which is the worst time since the Great Depression to be a finance graduate. Guys and gals with like 5 or 6 or 7, 8 years experience were getting laid off. Companies were going under. I was lucky to still have my job at the bank, but didn't see a whole lot of opportunity sort of ahead with so many talented people sort of being let go. So I had a friend who had actually been in MBET. I always had sort of an interest and a passion in tech at the time, whether I was reading up on the iPhone launch or what was happening in the tech space, but I wasn't technical at all. And to a certain extent, relative to my peers at Deloitte, I'm not technical at all, really, compared to many of them. But I came to MBET. I went to MBET to sort of bring the business perspective and hopefully pair up with folks who had some tech chops, and figured, the synergy of my business thinking and their tech thinking could make something happen. And at the same time, I could learn a little bit about what happens from a technology lifecycle standpoint, whatever it might be. As Paul sort of alluded to, had a really fortunate practicum and that's us over there, where we launched a mobile app. It was a mobile coupon app. It was pre-Groupon days. We were more concentrated on location-based coupons, so if you want to get a coffee or lunch and you want to save half price, that's what we were kind of, that was sort of our play. We called it the ugly C word because at that time when we were kind of going around trying to drum up sales and whatnot, people thought only grandparents, like our grandparents, used coupons, like clip them out of the newspaper type thing. And so we called it the ugly C word until Groupon launched that January, so 4 or 5 months after we did. We were the first mobile coupon app in Canada. But the whole Groupon model was based on, like, there's a large social component to it, but also the group buying aspect of it. We, as part of our failure, and we obviously failed because I'm still not I'm not doing the app and I'm not retired, so it's not like we've made a bunch of money and sold it. We never pivoted to address the group buying aspect. We were sort of ignorant to it. We also developed for BlackBerry because all the people that we were selling, our customers were not folks like us here, but were like Nike, Roots, retailers, restaurants and shops, and every time we go in and talk to a VP to try to get our product in there, they had a BlackBerry in their pocket. And they'd naturally say, you know, well, can I use it on the BlackBerry? BlackBerry was super hard to develop for at that time. And we were like, yeah, but your customers, folks, millennials, aren't, you know, using a BlackBerry. There's this thing called the iPhone and the Android that's gaining market share overnight. And we ignorantly tried to address and satisfy the needs of that 50-year-old CMO or VP, because when we went into pitch meetings, they'd pull up the BlackBerry and we'd be stopped right at the door. And we made the mistake of trying to chase that versus really listening to our gut, which was what the market wanted, which was improving the app and the experience for the people that actually go in and buy the Nike pair of shoes or want the half-price hamburger. So we obviously failed, and then I needed some money because, you know, startups aren't the highest paying gigs. And then I came to Deloitte. And as Paul alluded to, and I'll talk a little bit about it later on, as well, to give you a bit of a light into it, but Deloitte is massive, huge global company. I think we have 175,000 employees globally. Our business is structured in a way where most people know us from an audit and tax standpoint, but we have a huge component of what we call our business, which is consulting. And in consulting sits human capital, sits strategy and operations, and sits technology. Human capital is all around the change management that organizations go through and help consult them. When McDonald's wants to lay off 500 people, our consultants go in and negotiate that change and manage it so that employees so if the organization goes about things like that in the right way, and doesn't, you know, kind of alienate current employees and, you know, successfully kind of lays off some. Just one kind of example of that work. Strategy and operations is very similar to like your Bains, your BCGs, your McKinseys, your kind of pure strategy stuff. We do that. And then in technology, we do a whole bunch of things. And I sit in our technology group, which, like I said earlier, is a little bit unique for me. But the nature of our Agile work, and I'm on our Agile transformation team, and I'll talk a little bit about that, doesn't just touch technology, it touches people, it touches processes, and it touches strategic product development thinking. And I kind of want to bring the product development thinking piece sort of to light today. But that's, I guess, in a little bit of a nutshell, kind of Deloitte world. We've also recently, and I'll maybe go into a bit more detail later on if you guys have specific questions. Our firm has also tried to be responsive to what's happening in the marketplace. And what's happening in the marketplace from a digital standpoint is that agencies, your sort of traditional smaller digital agencies, have been winning big work over the past couple of years with large organizations who are typically our clients. Mobile, social, web, that type of stuff that's happening, all the things and products that we use, smaller agencies were winning the work. And it's not a typical place that our firm would play in to be sort of as an agency thinking mentality and chasing that work. We usually typically do large integrations or messy things like laying people off the right way, or thinking about strategic work from our strategy and operations standpoint. And over the last 18 to 24 months, our firm has launched Deloitte Digital, which is which is a very large departure from what Deloitte normally is, which is your stuffy, old accountant. You know, our offices in the US have kegs, there's dogs in the office, people bring their dogs on Fridays, and our Deloitte digital practice is really structured around trying to satisfy that need in the marketplace for clients like TD, like RBC, the big banks that are thinking more seriously about digital and how they connect with their customers. Being the class that you're in, just wanted to kind of let you guys know about that, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it later. That's a little bit about me and kind of where I sit within Deloitte and my journey here. And before I kind of go in what I want to talk about today, I would just want to start 5 minutes just kind of quickly going around the room. I hate referring to people by like the girl in the green shirt and the guy in the red shirt. So just want to get to know a bit about you and kind of see what you want to get out of today or what you're interested in from an Agile or a design standpoint. Cool? Sound good? So why don't we start here? And we'll just go name and kind of what you're interested in getting at today.
This is my favorite class I've taken this semester. I just like to put
My
name is Maiero. I'm actually working with the class.
Okay.
It's a mentor type project.
Cool.
Sponsored type situation.
Cool. And anything you want to get out of today? Or you're interested in?
Just really excited to hear you talk.
Cool. Sounds good. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Tammy, and I like that you already mentioned you're going to show us stuff from Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting to see how it goes from concept to reality and policy.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, on that, I'll be able to touch on, like I'm going to try to focus on the thinking that we're trying to embed with them. And I'll try to focus on a little bit of the process. The really interesting thing, and I'm going to, just because it's a point of reference for me in talking to Paul beforehand, and I know you're doing a project at the library, and I kind of want to contrast, you know, a project of that size versus the type of things that we try to do at scale at a company that has like 20,000 employees and has compliance, risk, security, and a ridiculous amount of approvals and people that need to know about things before we go through. It's hard to develop fast in large, complex organizations, and that's kind of what I want to bring you through too. So I'll definitely try to touch on a little bit of that.
Yeah, so my name is Christina, and I'm like Tina mentioned, I'm interested to hear you talk about how Agile plays in the process with the project you guys are working on.
Sure. Okay.
I'm Renee. I'm interested in UX design, so I want to know how Agile works for the process of UX design.
Okay. These are post-its, not going to rip those stuff off the wall. Okay. I've had clients like freak out on me that I'm supposed to know. Don't worry, the paint's going to be okay. Okay. And you're interested in how UX plays into the Agile process, or how?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Sorry.
My name's Paul.
Yeah.
I would love to know how I can get a really cool job like you have right now.
Do you not like your job here?
Good one. Good one. Usually Paul's the quick one on his feet. I like that.
I just failed.
Okay, we'll go here.
Well, I'm here actually today just to help these guys with their project, so
Okay, cool.
I'm part of it.
Just a guest. Cool.
My name is Aziz, and I'm interested in seeing how Deloitte will, like we talked about Agile in small groups when working 3 or 4 people, but in 20,000 employees organization, I'm
Sure.
curious
Okay.
how that works.
Yep, I'll definitely talk on that. Okay.
My name is Adi, and I'm interested in seeing Agile project management being applied practically and how we're learning it theoretically,
Okay.
and see the results of that.
Okay.
Do you usually use blue post-its?
No.
Because we always use yellow.
Yeah. Well, I usually, so here's the thing. I'm a big. We use a ridiculous amount of these. People ask us if we have shares in them. I usually like to use. I usually like to use colors that are like bright or green or yellows, right? Because it signifies like a trigger in our heads. Your hot pinks, your reds is usually like a bad sign type thing. Blue's the only thing I had in my bag.
Oh.
So there's no reason. There's no method to the madness. Okay. Up next.
I'm Piyush, and I want to know how Deloitte Digital works and
Cool.
everything that I can work about.
Sure. How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
Hello, I'm Momo. I used to work as a UX designer. So I used to work in a large company. So I remember several years ago, there's a guy who want to bring Agile into the company,
Yeah.
but they failed. So
Yeah.
I just want to know how it works in a big company.
Okay.
And, how you push Agile if the other department don't agree with you.
Yep. Okay. And I mean, the reality is, and so I'm just thinking through my slide deck, and I might have to dig through my inbox because there may be other, just based on kind of where the room's going. But failure is a huge portion of it, and we deal with resistance to change kind of every day on that. So definitely we'll touch on that. And being a UX, I'm not the most skilled and most experienced UX person. Like I said, I'm not. That's not how I'm wired type of thing. So totally loving the conversation that you guys might have, and I'm here to learn as well on some of that stuff. So cool.
Hi, my name is Ville, and I'm kind of interested in sort of similar what Momo said about the problems that Agile might have generated within Deloitte, what type of problems you might have faced within Agile environment.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, I'm Stefanos. I want to get into UX design and research, so I'm interested in finding out how companies like Deloitte approach design thinking, or how they approach UX in general.
Okay. We'll definitely touch on that.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, I'm Will. I work in an organization that is slowly becoming agile.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to find out how that change affects everyone.
And when you say slowly, it's pushed top down from leadership, or there's a team that's hey, I heard of this cool new thing that has a lot of post-it notes involved, and we want to start bottom up.
Being pushed top down, and they started with several teams to switch their projects to agile.
Okay.
And it was a success.
Yep.
So now they are growing it to more and more teams.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. We'd love to hear how that's kind of going and the questions you have around that. Cool.
My name is Marcia, and I am interested in learning about how, Deloitte approaches design strategy and how that works in larger financial companies.
Okay. Do my best on that.
Richard, I'm interested in your experience in Deloitte. Yeah, and what kind of the industry can the Agile fit in?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just while we kind of go there, just to load up my backlog, might as well kind of start to answer some of these as we go. Poor backlog management. So to be honest with you, we're seeing, so I would say in the last 18 to 24 months, and even more so in the last 12 months, the amount of industries or organizations that are going to Agile or taking a look at it from a way that they develop is becoming a lot larger than it probably once used to be. We just, by nature of clients asking us for help, we're seeing that kind of at the front end. Traditionally it was kind of IT. You had developers who used to operate in the waterfall world, wanted to do things sort of better, and from 2001 to kind of where we are today, it traditionally lived just within IT in tech, maybe tech type environments, right? But we're seeing transportation, logistics companies, manufacturers of candies and foods, folks that really you might not have heard of 24 months ago or even 12 months ago, gain the insight of, hey, this might be able to help us. So it's really industry agnostic in that sense these days. It's not just your Facebooks, your Googles, it's sort of like everyone to a certain extent, which is really exciting. And to be honest with you, if I look 4, 5, 6 years down the road, the way that organizations look at product development, I think will, 105 to 500,000 sort of % growth from an Agile standpoint. And I've just seen that in my last 4 or 5 years at Deloitte, the amount of adoption that's happened. So I don't see it kind of going anywhere, and it's less about process, which is one of the big things. There is a process involved, but It's a more way of thinking, almost than anything else, and that's becoming really pervasive these days. So.
I'm Chloe. I'm interested in if you can give us some best practice or tips and tricks using Agile management, because we don't really, I don't have any experience in Agile, and I want to know if you have any suggestions or recommendations.
Sure. Okay. On your project now, or in?
Yeah.
Okay. First one is make things big and visible, right? Like Post-it notes. Seriously, our work is invisible a lot of times as knowledge workers and what we do. I know we create designs and all that sort of thing, but the process to get to that actual design at times is invisible, or it's a work in progress type thing. When you think about a team and being kind of co-located in the same room or same environment, getting the work out of like an Excel tracking or project management kind of tool and putting it up on a wall, when you sit around it, we call it, kind of use the geeky term, an information radiator. And seeing the work that I'm doing and you're doing and how it relates to the progress that we're trying to achieve on the day or the week or the sprint or the month or whatever it might be, is just like one little simple thing to get aligned from a team standpoint. So use the walls, use Post-it notes, get things up, especially from a design standpoint. Get those things up on the wall, right? Do things like paper prototyping or mocking things up on kind of big walls, and have people kind of collaborate around it versus kind of sitting always on your laptop. Because the conversation and just having it persistently in your face versus on a file on your desktop that you can't see is a lot more powerful than you think it might be.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm here because Paul could be hiring. But I'm interested in seeing Agile project management and its interaction with like different kinds of companies. So like you said, you're seeing different kinds of company, not just technology company, adapting Agile management. So I kind of want to see more about that and also the future of Agile management in companies like Deloitte.
Sure. And just on the job thing. So I get, So my team is like I say, in the Agile transformation practice within Deloitte, and I'll talk more about it later on. So I'm working, we're actively recruiting for that, and I'm one of like 5 people that are responsible for it on our team. I'm not part of our Deloitte digital practice, which also might resonate with some of you folks, but I can certainly sort of show you what's available, and I'll maybe pull up our site at the end and show you kind of where you can kind of go see what opportunities are available. If anything interests you, I'll certainly reach out and I'll put you in touch with our DE, we call it the DE team, and kind of take it from there. Okay. Cool. All right.
I'm Cassiano, and I'm interested in finding out how design fits into the Agile workflow. So does design exist on its own, or is it possible to have design and development happen together at the same time?
Mm-hmm. So why don't we do this? Let me be agile with the presentation since we're kind of going there, and just jump to. So, because a couple people have sort of talked about it. So let me just paint the picture of a really large, big behemoth of a redesign that a client or an organization might need to go through. Think of, Wells Fargo, big financial services firm, right? In the waterfall world, they really neglected areas of their platform because they were project-based. And I'll talk about the differences between being project-based and product-based in a moment, but they would sort of just chase this shiny light bulb, right? And they would align projects and the people that were supporting those projects to different areas based on whatever it was that the organization needed. Those projects in a waterfall world took a significant amount of time to design, develop, gather requirements, design, develop, and test. You can think of like a 12 to 18 month cycle. In 12 to 18 months, the world, especially today, moves extremely, extremely fast. And at Wells, because they weren't agile, in 18 months, you can imagine a whole bunch of people focusing on one area of the platform, while another area of the platform totally gets neglected. And part of the change process that we've instituted from an agile standpoint is aligning people to products so that you have small and nimble teams allocated evenly across all of the products that you have. The change that created is that there were areas of the platform, like the one I'm going to sort of talk about today, that were neglected for a really, really long time. And so there's a large amount of design and overhaul that needs to be done. When we think about, everyone's familiar with like Scrum here, yeah, the Scrum sprints, 2, 3, or 4 week sort of sprints. So if you want to do, and ideally you want to do design, development, and test in 2 week sprint, right? But it's really hard to let the creative mind think and do design work, design thinking, right? And do your mock-ups and your wireframes, which our UX designers would do, in 1 or 2 days, agree to it, right? Because you might not just have one version, you might have 3 variations of what you think your product will look and feel like, and then develop and test it. So at Wells, because they've neglected parts of their area for so long with the clients that within the area of the platform, we've had to sort of slowly introduce change from how they can become more agile. And so we essentially have a design sprint centered around UX, which I'll show you a little bit more of. Following that 2 week sprint, then they apply the visual design treatment to it, right, based on an agreed upon UX and wireframe. And then they will spend the 3rd sprint developing and testing it. And some might say that's kind of mini waterfall, or not very agile. And to a certain extent, you're right. But it's the reality of slowly introducing the change, because they've kind of neglected this area of the platform for so long, where this first sprint, and I'm going to go into more detail what happens here, is really a huge exploration on what are the 5 or 6 different versions of our page that we could potentially sort of look at, right? If I came back to my client 18 months from now, in one sprint, it would look a lot more like this, where I'm doing my UX, my visual design treatment, and developing and testing in 2 weeks. But because there's so much UX work that needs to be done, and we also test live with real customers within 2 weeks, which is really, really, really hard to do, and I'll kind of walk you through that. We've had to sort of break it up like this. So one sprint for one page, we'll spend a bunch of time doing it. In the second sprint, we'll add the visual design treatments to it, so that's your colors, your typography, making it look and feel like we want it to. At the same time, my UX team will be going and iterating on a new page, right? Get that all sort of sorted out. And then in the 3rd sprint, we'll develop and test the UX wireframe that we started 2 sprints ago. They'll apply the visual design treatments to the work that we did here in the 2nd sprint, and they'll develop and test, and they'll start a new UX process for a whole other page. So, and I'll dive a little bit more into a little bit more detail there, but I figured since you kind of asked it, it's in short, it's really hard, right? Because we just haven't had people focused on products. It's always been projects, and they just kind of go wherever they want. And that's a big fundamental mindset shift. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that on this, like on another slide, but I figured I'd kind of go there since you did now. Any questions on that? And you guys are just, some of you are designers, so you're going to probably critique the aesthetics of my slides. But does anyone confused by that or have any questions on it?
Is this one team that does UX, the UX and the VD and all?
Great question. Great question. Great question. So, one team. So there's a couple core principles that we try to adhere to, which is having fixed and dedicated team members on our team. So this team would have a product owner, which is the front-facing kind of voice of the customer or the traditional business. They'd have a UX. So, and here's what we want to talk about challenges. Here's one. So currently at Wells, our UX and visual designers are not really one. They're 2 separate people that sort of report into 2 separate organizations. So they traditionally in the waterfall world never really talked to each other. Now we've made them kind of sit within one team and support one team, and that's tricky. And the other thing is our UX people just kind of do UX stuff and never really do visual design work. And that kind of goes against kind of people that can multitask or have breadth in different areas. But in this example, the team has, like all of our teams right now, a product owner, a UX designer, a visual designer, 2, maybe 3 developers, some front end, some back end, and then testers. And so they're working on different types of things, but the team of 10 just focuses on one kind of core area of the platform, and they never change. And I don't want Bob, my UX designer, on one day to be focused on onboarding, let's call it, or mobile, is maybe a bit easier. Let's get our mobile product, and then the next sprint, go do something for onboarding, or account servicing, or our notifications team. Because the context switching that has to happen in his head around what's the reason we're actually building this product in the first place and where we're at in the process. So we try to keep people stuck to one product.
So when you say they're on the team, they never change teams?
They never change teams.
So once you're on a team at Deloitte, you stay on that team forever?
So let me, and I maybe should have said this. So my role, I should have had a slide on this. So my role is going to clients at Wells Fargo, and they say, we want to be agile, right? And so we say, your waterfall today, there's a whole bunch of things that need to happen. And this was the byproduct of me going out of slide order, but learning lesson for me. We want to be agile. And so what I do is help them through the change, through coaching, through figuring out what the process needs to look like, through team HR related questions on how they want to structure their teams, and all of that. I am not a member on this mobile team. I'm a coach to help them through this process and change their thinking from a waterfall to an agile role. So Deloitte's role in what I do is to coach people through this change and help them understand what they need to do, how they can think more like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, and develop products that way. Our digital team, right, and this is where the switch happens, our digital team actually will get asked by companies like Wells Fargo to say, hey, we don't have like a lot of innovative design thinkers and aren't up on the newest and latest designs. Can you guys come in and actually do some work and prototypes on our behalf? And so ironically at Wells Fargo, I was coaching their own teams, but we also had one team, which was our digital design team, worked on engaging a whole new refresh of their site because they didn't have the internal capability for it at the time. Yeah. Sorry, I should have been more clear on that maybe later. Any other questions? All right.
I'm Irina.
Yep.
So pretty much the same as Christiana said, so I'm interested in how UX and design can work very into Agile, like you want to explain.
Okay.
And just looking forward to the next year.
Cool. Sounds good.
I'm Danielle, and you sort of touched on this as well, but I'm really interested in the design thinking process.
Yep.
And when I was first introduced to Agile, I was struggling to see how those could fit together because I've always learned through design thinking and creative problem solving that area, and then learning about Agile and having all of those quick iterations just sort of took me out of that and thinking how does the creative process actually happen.
Yeah.
So you sort of touched on it here, but I'm interested to see it throughout the process.
You remind me of just with your words, you remind me of a colleague out of our Seattle office who I worked with who spent time with me at Wells Fargo. And she had never done Agile before. And she was a UX designer, so she was our senior UX lead on this, and I'm gonna show her work to you in a bit. So we had 2-week sprints, and she was like, and I was kind of scrum mastering, coaching that team. And she was like, Paul, like, how the hell am I gonna do this? Like, you need to allow me time to think. I need to go through various prototypes and mock-ups. I need to like internalize it, sit on it for a little bit. I need to bounce it off peers. And you want me to do UX, visual design in like 2 weeks. And oh, by the way, in that process, we want to run it through our customers. So actually get feedback on it within 2 weeks and then iterate on it. She almost killed me when I was like, you know what I mean? It was really tough, right? And it challenged my thinking, right? Because you gotta remember, I'm not wired like most of you in the room. I'm not a designer and I don't have that sort of thinking. I'm more of an agile guy that helps people through change. And my projects haven't always been working with development teams that spend a lot of time designing. There's a lot of internal facing applications. It's not always about the customers. Banks have applications that they develop internally, and sometimes you work on that and it's kind of an ugly screen and no one really cares because it's just passing data back and forth and that sort of thing. So I got challenged by it. And so Ashby and I had to work through how this is actually going to look and feel like. And since you kind of mentioned it, I'll maybe sort of jump there now. Ooh, not the thing, slide. We sort of landed on something like this. So two weeks, right? 2 weeks to do UX, visual design, and she thought I was crazy. And I was like, you're right, I am crazy, right? So how can we get around this? And here's the thing, right? And this is sort of a bit of a, one of the things with Agile. It really is not meant to be prescriptive, right? Agile sort of takes a philosophy that interactions and individuals, if anyone's familiar with the Agile Manifesto that was created in 2001, that interactions and individuals over process and tools. Our process and tools are important, but if we don't interact and think with people that we're working with, it's really kind of an Agile anti-pattern. So Ashby was like, not doing it, Paul. We're not doing UX and visual design in 2 weeks. So I said, okay, what can we do, right? Let's be flexible about it, but let's still try to push the envelope for our client to think about how we can iterate on designs. And this is sort of what we landed with. So first day of the sprint, we would do sprint planning, right? And I'll show you kind of what the pages and what they sort of started out like. But we would say, okay, we want to redesign the account summary page. Think of any of your banking app, online statements. We want to redesign the account summary page. Okay, great. Ashby would spend generally days 2 to 4 on conceptualizing what the account summary page looked like. So she would spend 2 days and come up with a series of wireframes against redesigning the account summary page. Then I threw this wrench at her where I was like, okay, well, we want to test that to customers in 5 days. So you're nuts. I'm like, no, we have to, let's just try it, right? What can we do to push the envelope around that? So on the 5th day, we recruited 5 customers. So we had a predetermined persona. So if anyone's familiar with personas, yeah. So we had a predetermined persona for the site. There were 4 different personas, and our team went out into the market, whether it was in Seattle or San Francisco or Charlotte, and recruited customers that fit a profile around net worth, around desires, around age group, and all that sort of thing. And we would put Ashby's 3 or 4 prototypes to 5 or 6 customers in 1 hour sessions. So all day on the 5th day, Ashby would go interviews, put the design in front of them, they would be recorded. She would ask them a series of questions, and she would obtain a bunch of information on the designs and wireframes that she developed days 2 and 4. This, for Wells Fargo, was groundbreaking. This is really, really hard to do. There was a book that just got launched on Wednesday of this week, which I encourage all of you to read and pick up. It's by the Google Ventures team. It's called Sprint. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. It basically outlines what Google does with their portfolio companies, so the companies that they've invested in, around 5-day sprints. And I'm kind of proud that we were able to do that last summer to a certain extent at Wells Fargo. But she would put it in front of them, right? So 8 or 9 people, depending. Sometimes we got down to 3 or 4 because it's hard to find the right persona. They would give her a whole bunch of feedback, and then she would iterate on that design on days 6 through 8, right? And the entire time, we had our client there as well. So our product owner was Wells Fargo. Our client, we had one kind of main person on it. And he would work with her on, that client or that user said they didn't like where the navigation was. They wanted fat nav over a skinny nav. The fat nav kind of goes against the rest of our design principles on other portions of the page. So even though they all said that, we can't really do that because then we're going to have a hodgepodge of product or a hodgepodge navigation across our entire experience. And so she worked really closely with him on obtaining the feedback, validating it. Like sometimes, if you believe what Steve Jobs says, our customers don't know what they don't know, and we're right more than that they are, That's one way of thinking about it. So we validate whether or not those customers provided commentary that made sense. She would work on phase 6 to 8 to iterate on that UX design, and then our product owner, which was our customer, our customer's name was Jeff, and Jeff would determine whether or not he would accept that story and that wireframe. The next 10 days, Ashby would go through this exact same process with another page. Meanwhile, Ashby's colleague, our visual designer, Khalida, would take the wireframe, right, absent of visual design treatments or anything like that, and she would do visual design through the same process. And on the 5th day, she would apply those treatments and put it in front of the customers and iterate on it for the last day. And then that's where it kind of stopped and would get handed over to a developer and a tester to code. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Any questions on that?
I have a question about how the UX and the design team work together in that situation. So if the design team takes the wireframe and start working on it, will they go back to the UX team and discuss further if they have any questions, or just like they follow their own vision?
Here's the big change, right? And it comes back to Tim's question earlier. We didn't have separate teams. So Khalida, Ashby, Jeff, myself, and a couple other folks, we had kind of more analysts that were doing some of the legwork on figuring out, recruiting the clients. We were one team. We sat together. Our client, Jeff, lived in San Francisco. If we had usability study in Seattle, he would fly to Seattle and spend the day with us. And our entire team spent time in whatever city we needed to be in together. So there was no handoff, because it's one of the big things with Waterfall. You had a visual design team or you have a business analysis team, and they do a bunch of work and then they hand it over to the design team, and the design team has no idea what's going on because they've never been a part of the process, and they got to spend 2-3 weeks figuring out the why and the what, and sometimes they don't even care about the why because they've got a timeline to go through. So the visual designer, the UX individual, the product owner, developer, that's the team, and they spend time sitting together and they sit in the same room together, which is a big challenge because from an Agile standpoint, if we think about cost, and we think about what clients or what organizations do with offshoring of work to India or to parts of Southeast Asia because it's more cost effective, all of a sudden Paul comes in and says, I want everyone on the team to be located in the same room, they freak out at me, right? And I simply say, well, there's a lot of benefit to having folks in the same room, and I want those people to get out of their cubicles, and we're going to move them all into an open space, kind of like what you guys have actually designed, what Waterloo has designed this office to look and feel like. That's a big shift, and that doesn't happen overnight. And there's certainly a component to teams that are offshore or outsourced, right? But we try to push to a co-located, fixed, and dedicated team environment. So just to come back to your question, I kind of went on a different path there to a certain extent. But in terms of the understanding between UX and VD about what the work is, they're sitting next to each other in the same room while they're working on different pages because we couldn't do it in the same 2 weeks. They're connected at the hip. Every meeting that we have, sprint planning meeting, every sprint review, every daily stand-up, every product backlog refinement meeting, in those 2 weeks, Khalida and Ashby were always together, even though they were working on sort of different pages. And our client, Jeff, would be there or be on the phone if he didn't need to be in the room. That was a bit of a tricky part because it's a little different when you have a client and a vendor in that instance, but yeah. And that goes with all the teams, all the Scrum teams I have at Wells Fargo right now. They're all fixed and dedicated to an area of the platform and spend all day with each other. The real estate issue of putting them all in one room is a little bit more of a challenge because people don't like leaving their big cubicles. Any other questions? Yeah.
So the same happens, I guess, with developers or any other stakeholder that has to be there.
Yeah, that's right. On my team, I've got front-end, back-end developers, testers, a couple different flavors of test, probably more than I would like, but all in the same room, all joining the same meetings. If my tech, and this is the thing, right? If my developer has no idea that I'm planning to redo the account summary page, and then he or she gets it 2 sprints later, he's going to be completely in the dark. He or she's going to be uncomfortable, not know where the data is coming from, not know what they can leverage from a pattern standpoint or code repository standpoint, and he or she's gonna have to take 2 or 3 days coming up to speed. The big mental shift from a development standpoint, and I don't know if you asked it because you've got development background,
No.
but one of the things that we try to do with our developers, and we do it the same way with our UX and our visual designers, is bring them to the forefront of understanding the why are we building this. So allow them to be with the business and the client and the stakeholders that say we need to redesign the site. Because if you think about it, with anything that we do in life, if you don't know the why, you're not really going to necessarily put out as good of a product. And so having a developer and a tester just be a part of the why. Why are we doing this? Because our page sucks, because clients have drop-off points when they try to view their account summary, is extremely important once they actually receive those designs to code them. And the same thing goes for our designers. I want my designers to be with our business people or our product people, because if they don't understand the why am I doing the account summary page, you can't have a good design in my opinion. Anything else? Yeah.
I have a question, what if you have to work with people from different countries, or like you cannot gather them together?
Yeah.
Like the Agile skill can apply to those like
Yeah.
kind of teams.
So two examples. So prior to being at Wells, I was at American Express for 2 years. Amex had a huge portion, an offshore model component. They had something like on a given team or project, depending on how they classified it at the time, they had something like 40% FTEs, so actual employees, and 60% being contractors or vendors. So companies like Cognizant, where they would just kind of contractually hire them for 2 or 3 months. In addition, a large portion of that 60% of vendors was offshore. When we were there and we were like, you're slow to market, Square and PayPal are eating your lunch, and you're a payments company, like you should have thought of those products and got them to market sooner, not some financial tech startup. They said, okay, well, what can we do differently? And one of our recommendations was, you need to onshore people again. So you need to reduce the dependency you have on the offshore model, which is just, some people would tell me that I'm wrong because I'm working 24 hours a day around the clock. I inherently believe, based on the teams I've worked with, that having 6 people in the same room for 12 hours a day reduces dependencies and gets things done a lot quicker and helps people understand context a lot more. Amex got it, and they actually believed in that based on pilots that we ran and the data that came out of it. So they started to onshore more work and more people in that sense, and convert people to FTEs from contractors. But the reality is, in these large organizations, there's always going to be an offshore component to a certain extent. It's never going to go away. And you can do Agile with that. So we have daily stand-ups with our team in India. My mobile team right now has a couple folks out in India right now. They work on London hours. And so we have a sweet spot of time in the morning where they handed over code to our team. We talk as a team on, here's what I did, and here's what's outstanding, or here are the defects. It can work. And it can work with even Agile teams or Scrum teams that are distributed in the same country. So on some of my teams, unfortunately right now, because it's hard to hire tech people in Charlotte or visual designers in Charlotte, just by nature of the marketplace. It's not as creative as Stratford and Waterloo. We've got some folks in St. Louis and San Francisco. It can work. It just, in my opinion, can be a lot more effective if they're in the same place. But it's not to say it can't work. You just need to be a lot more dedicated to communicating with your colleagues. Cool.
Hi.
I realize I'm doing like my presentation at the same time, but otherwise this backlog will be huge. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nissa. And along with the Agile, I want to learn more about the bigger picture of this presentation. Like, not just learning about one focused thing,
Yeah.
but how can my experience and knowledge that I've gained from this campus be applied to the real world?
Yeah. Okay.
That's my takeaway.
All right, cool.
I'm Fazan. I'm basically interested in learning about when Deloitte is working on a project which has so much at stake in terms of reputation and in finance, and you face a crisis. how does Deloitte use Agile in that kind of a situation where you have a crisis?
Okay.
And how can you avoid crisis when you are following all the possible required suggested procedures, and if you fail a crisis in that situation, how do you deal with that?
The short answer is you can't avoid crisis, because sometimes you just can't see it. But the important thing is how you respond to it, right? And in an agile world, if we believe it provides transparency to a lot of things by nature of like shrinking and being a little bit more iterative with our process and a whole bunch of other things, it's really on how you deal with it, because you can never always avoid, you can't avoid everything, you can't see everything that's out there. And so it's just being responsive to how you deal with people and how people react to it, and I'll talk a little bit about it when I go through in a bit. And last but not, oh no, we got two more.
Hi, I'm Natasha, and like Nissa, I'm kind of interested in how the skills that we've learned here and like the skills I have from my professional background can kind of be adapted to this sort of style of management.
Cool.
I have some project management background, but I don't think it fits in either Agile or Waterfall. It's just kind of collective.
Okay. All right, cool.
Hi, I'm Navdeep, and I want to know that how to identify and evaluate the risks involved with the Agile projects.
Yeah. So.
And second is how the Agile strategy changes from project to project.
Okay. And last but not least, I know we met, but just.
I'm Peter. I'm keen to understand how Deloitte approach Agile. I teach a lot of project management, and so I'm going to video your session to use with future students. And
cool.
Thanks for letting me do that.
No problem, no problem. And hi, future students. So just taking a bit of a step back, and this is kind of me going back to, because I'm jumping around. Clients come to us and ask us, and this is kind of putting the more agile lens on things. Clients come back to us and come to us to ask us, listen, we want to be agile. We're slow to market is one of the common themes that comes out of it. We're not very responsive to our customers' needs or desires because of the fact that we're slow to market. Or we want to reduce cost, which surprisingly enough, we're hearing less and less of. I think a couple of years ago it was like, well, I can do more with less and be faster to market, so I don't need as many people. I'm not hearing that as much from clients these days around the why they go agile. And we want to induce a lot more quality in sort of what we do. Those are kind of the four sort of pieces to it. And so, and I have, that's a little typo there, but anyways, we have clients that are at this portion of the world, my Wells Fargo sort of thing, where they're purely waterfall, right? They're not doing anything in Agile, they're not doing any projects in Agile at all. And they want to start to maybe experiment with what's happening in the Agile space. Sometimes we have clients that come to us that are sort of like, and I forget your name. Will, where we've experimented with it on a few teams. But this is sort of the spectrum that we see, and we're trying to push clients to the right. Which is to move away from obviously being waterfall, but also to move away from two important paradigms. Being project-centric and shift into a product-centric organization where I can have, like Tim asked and the gentleman at the back, fixed and dedicated teams that are nurturing one or two areas of the platform. Because that allows teams to get iterative with the features and functionality that are on the site. So I mentioned earlier I was at American Express for 2 years. They used to be project-centric. We shifted all their teams to be evenly distributed around different areas of their platform. So there was a log-in, log-out team. So when you, and it sounds really juvenile, but when you like forget your password, and you have to go through a whole bunch of questions, literally there was a team just dedicated to all that entire experience, right? And the notification emails you would get and everything. We had an account summary team, we had a payments team, we had a navigation team. We had a team across the entire online digital experience, 100% dedicated to it for the foreseeable future. People leave the organization and go, you're never going to stop someone from leaving, but they focused on that area of the platform. And after about 12 to 18 months, when those areas of the platform had a constant team spending every single day going through that design process and that development process that I outlined earlier, they're able to do really exceptional things with their projects, with the feature enhancements that they have on their products. 2 weeks ago, my colleague Kevin and I, we still have a relationship with a lot of folks at Amex, and they said, listen, we just did something finally groundbreaking where we've actually kind of moved the needle to feel like we're over here a little bit more. They had an ask to move a button on a page, right? And because they had spent 18 or 12 months with a team that was just dedicated to that page, it looked and felt great. It didn't have the challenge I had earlier where we had to do design, UX, VD, and development in separate sprints. We could do it all in the same sprint because the changes were smaller and incremental versus large and massive overhauls of pages. So they have a lot of stakeholders at Amex. There's international business units, and one of those business units came and said, hey, I want to add this button to the page, right? We noticed that people, if they have an awareness in a very simple way on this particular part of the page of knowing what their account spend is remaining based on their card limit, that people will spend X amount more over the next 30 to 60 hour period. And the time was bizarre, but they had that kind of quantitative data on it. So they hit the account summary team and they were like, hey, what do you think of this? Account summary team was like, great. We'll take that into a sprint. We'll see what changes we can make. Because they were just making such minor and incremental upgrades to the page, because they had moved to a product-centric organization that always nurtured some area of the platform. In one sprint, they had a UX team and their visual designer just move the button and experiment with where it could be. And by the end of the sprint, they had it coded and tested. 7 days later, it was released because they actually can release publicly early and often, which is another big challenge from an Agile standpoint, but they had maturity around that. 7 days later, they had an uplift of $7 million in revenue directly attributed to just moving a button to one other area of the page. That is profound, right? My client Wells Fargo can't do that today because they've got a waterfall and project-centric kind of focus where they just kind of move to the shiny object. And so those incremental design changes and changes around feature set on a page for my team at Amex, they can move the needle overnight really quickly. And that's being a lot more of an outcome sort of driven organization, which is where we sort of want to get clients to move towards. That's a bit of the landscape of the sort of things that we typically deal with or see around the type of thinking that we're trying to change with them. Any questions on that? Yep.
How do you ensure consistency between product groups? Because so one group is focused on that login logout process and you said another group maybe is on the account summary page, I would assume they probably don't have daily meetings with each other, but how do they communicate between, just to make sure that everything is...
That's a great question, because otherwise your product becomes a Frankenstein, right, potentially. And this is where there's a bit of org design that kind of comes into play that's important, because on top of those teams, we try to, and this is one area that is really hard for an external person to kind of influence because it's a sensitive topic, but we try to influence the way that leadership sits on top of those teams. So if you think about a team, I've got my product owner, a scrum master, a UX, a visual designer, a developer, and a tester. In some clients I've been to, each of those people will report into like literally a different person, right? Like, because it's domain driven. They've never really thought about it from a team standpoint, and so it's siloed like that because that's the old waterfall world. What we try to do is like, there needs to be some synergy. I can't have 7 people that are like working together all day report to 7 different people. If you, just by nature of like motives for some people or what they're being told by leadership, it could be 7 different things that doesn't sit true and isn't holistic with the desires of the team. So we like to have like a product VP and a technology VP or a leader or a manager, whatever you want to call it, like some sit on top of those teams that has a group of 3 or 4, the product owner, the business analyst, the designers go into the product VP, and the tech folks go into the tech VP. Those tech VPs oversee multiple teams and are sort of the eyes and ears on making sure consistency from a design or a development standpoint is happening, and pull in respective members of those teams when needed. But it's the structure that we sort of sit at and the type of dialogue that needs to happen sort of above them. If you can imagine, I had 7 different kind of leads on top of those teams, and there's 35 Scrum teams. It just becomes insane. Amex, we got them up to, within one part of Amex is huge, we got them up to 35 Scrum teams, just north of 35 in a year, which is crazy. How do you ensure consistency? Well, my leaders need to be talking. The big change for leadership when it comes to Agile is you need to get out of your desk and you need to go see what your teams are doing. It sounds really simple, but a lot of large organizations just have leaders in a cube or in an office and they don't talk or see people. We get them joining stand-ups, we get them in the sprint review. Like if my VP of product isn't in a sprint review, he gets a nasty email from me because you're doing a disservice and you don't even know what's being built in your own products. Because every 2 weeks, 7 of his teams are building new features. Versus the waterfall world where he could wait 18 months or 12 months and get this big download of kind of what's happening. So it's really about the structure over top of it. Any other questions? And someone keep me honest with time here because I'm Italian and I talk a lot. Yeah.
Is this what Scrum of Scrums?
Yeah, and you'll do things like Scrum of Scrums, right? Where you'll have teams or people on teams kind of come together and collaborate. But even there, sometimes those teams don't know what they don't know from like going back to your question around design consistency, right? Have we changed a pattern? Are we changing our color scheme and all that sort of thing? So, yeah.
Do you have a user researcher guy in this team, or like just a designer do the research?
Yeah. So, like in my example at Wells Fargo, our UX person was also UCD. So our UX, I don't like to call people resources, or our UX team member, or people on the team are also go into our UCD team. So they're part of that organization. So they'll do the usability testing, for instance. They'll try to do the focus groups, and they'll also do the wireframes because of the importance that they see in having that kind of connection around kind of full end-to-end work that they do. This is kind of like, I don't know, I'm not really a big fan of this slide, but I thought I needed something to explain a journey. And by the way, you see like got different color schemes on different slides because I'm kind of lifting things from different projects, really violating some design standards. You guys would probably kill me. But from an Agile standpoint, when we go into clients, we really try to co-create change. And that's kind of why I asked you earlier, was it top-down, was it bottom-up driven, kind of what is it? There's different ways of doing it, and you almost sort of need both at the same time. But to the gentleman that talked about crisis happens on day one when people don't like change. And some organizations have change all the time. Reorgs, firings, layoffs, and the last thing I want is for Paul to walk into a company and, oh great, we're changing our process again, we just changed a couple of months ago. So we're big believers in co-creating the change. And that means allowing teams to sort of define what the journey is for them. I was going to talk about it a bit earlier, but I didn't. I thought there's a lot of content. I was trying to be concise with it. But there's different Agile frameworks out there, right? You guys know about Scrum. There's Kanban, which is leveraged from the Toyota Production System. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, right? Which is visual, which is kind of like my backlog on the wall. It's Japanese for visual sign card. There's a model called SAFe, which is the Scaled Agile Framework. There's XP, there's DAD, there's LESS, there's Lean Startup. All of these frameworks are Agile to a certain extent for different reasons, so there's a lot of them out there. And sometimes, for one team, Kanban, so using big visual boards that manage their workflow, is more suitable and kind of desired by them than using Scrum. They're a maintenance release team and maybe they always get requests on the type of work they do and they can't kind of fix scope in 2 weeks, and so they choose Kanban. If I came in and I said to them, you need to do Scrum, they're going to be like, get the hell out of here, right? Or we're not going to do it, or they're not going to be effective and passionate about it. So we're big on co-creating the change with the people on the ground, making sure that leaders understand and sort of craft that journey together with them. The resistance to change becomes less. It doesn't go away, but it becomes less. And this is just kind of a bit of you kind of read the smaller text on it, but from there we typically pilot with a few teams. like what Agile can kind of look like and feel like. So we take 4 or 5 teams. We try to set them up for success, but we also like to try to break our own model. So we'll sort of make one team, they sometimes don't know it, kind of be the odd sheet. So you talk about offshore, we're like, yeah, let's do it with offshore. Let's do it with a distributed team. Let's not give them a tool like Rally or Jira or an Agile lifecycle management tool and see what breaks. Because we want to kind of learn from those pilot teams and to improve the model that we want to eventually sort of scale out to other teams. And then eventually slowly onboard new teams in waves. But we're big on not being fixated on one process and making sure that we adapt the process based on what's kind of scaling to new teams. Any questions there? This is a bit of, I don't know, this is going to kind of sound like I'm pumping my own tires, but this was like a snapshot of some of the success that we had in 1 year at a segment of American Express. Kind of 3 big things that came out of the change to Agile. And there's a lot of success factors for why we were successful there. But customer satisfaction being first and foremost. When I had someone on the log-in, log-out team be dedicated to that experience the entire time, we had things like satisfaction go from 18.5% to 46%. That is huge, right, in a 12-month period, particularly for an old, stale, big, and slow-moving organization. Another product, like 6.1% customer satisfaction to 43%. When we just let a team sit on that area of the platform, be responsive to customer feedback, be responsive to the design on a daily basis, profound things can happen. We completed more initiatives. So one of the big things, and we're glad that this sort of happened, in 2013, they only completed 2 initiatives that they had with the same amount of people. We didn't increase headcount. We were able to actually get 6 out of the door in an Agile world. We went from 5 major releases, so those were actually like releases into production where people like us would actually see the features, which is something we want to get away from because you want to be able to release early and often and shorten that time to learning. If you code a page or a new page for the account summary page, do we want to wait 3 months to get it in front of a customer? No, we want to try to shorten that. So we went from 5 releases to 40, which is massive. A lot of technical infrastructure had to be set up for that, but that was a big win. And then we just had a lot of a healthy amount of throughput and predictability on the teams, and decreased the amount of defects that we had in production. Quality is big from an Agile standpoint. So that's a bit of that. In the essence of time, I think I'm going to jump to and show you maybe, if no one has any more specific Agile context questions, and I can certainly go through a whole bunch more. Maybe I'll show you the designs that we worked on from WFA. That got released last week. Okay. We're gonna have to be a bit. So, let me take you back to. So I just want to give you a flavor for what I don't know if you guys can see that. So, I talked about that what happens in the 10 days when you were like, it's really hard to do all of that in 10 days. This is just kind of a brief synopsis of what we were showing clients by that 5th day. So we had a whole bunch of study information, a persona who we wanted to target. We had a bunch of goals that we were trying to achieve within it and a whole bunch of tasks associated with it. And these were and this is going back to last summer, but these were so we'd start mobile first, and these are really like, kind of primitive and ugly. But we'd start mobile first and no visual design treatments, and this is what sort of Ashby worked on for the first sort of 2 to 3 days of the sprint, like I said. This was all around a mobile experience of adding a goal. So Tim wants to save for retirement or save for a car. And it was a whole mobile experience that had never existed before. And we wanted people to obviously fund and invest accounts easily and quickly. And so this is the mock-up version of something that they never had before. She would go through that, do 1 rev of it, the 8 steps of the process. Do a second version of it, which you can see this one is more kind of text heavy than the first one, which is more image based and slider based. The whole thinking on this one was I would take my goal, whatever it was, and just drag it onto a moving timeline versus having to punch in 15 or punch in 10 years or whatever, punch in or from a drop down menu. So it was very easy to kind of add a goal. Whereas the second version was more sort of text based, and I would click into I want to build wealth and then touch based on that, based on the logic of whatever it was that they wanted to do, would go to another page and so on and so forth. 2 really vastly different sort of experiences. And then I would enter the age manually and enter the amount, right? I think you guys can kind of probably sense which one was probably received better, but, and there's other considerations here too. So one of the big things, and for some of the more design-centric folks in the room, accessibility is a big thing at Wells Fargo. All the way that pages load, the colors, people have, like, you know, and this has been a learning experience for me. I never used to really think about it because I'm not a designer, but if a page loads a certain way and there's certain colors that come up, like it can actually trigger seizures with people. People have certain issues around that. And so the things that we wanted to do, our accessibility person in November would be like, you can't do that. And so some of these different designs took accessibility in mind when we kind of made them. And we continue to kind of mock them up and then sort of eventually put them in front of users. Now, what eventually happened was we started mobile first, and then we moved to making it obviously responsive and across the entire sort of platform itself. This was a earlier iteration of the page before we redesigned it. There was a whole bunch of technical challenges and design challenges around what this sort of looked like. These were the new designs that got launched last week that we worked on. So this is, for instance, I think this is the account summary page of it. And that's sort of what the end product eventually looked like. And that would be a page that in a 1 week or 2 week sprint, you would actually UX, then do your visual design, and that's the whole process that we went through to that. Here's the previous version. That's kind of our new version, a little bit flat, a little bit more visually appealing. There's also a whole bunch of new features and functionality that we would enable when you actually click the stock ticker or a ticker symbol. Let's just more. Let's see here. We'll go back to the beginning. So yeah, these are just basically pages that, this is what we get out of our 2 week sprints, right? By the time that they actually got a little bit of maturity around what it is that they did. But it took time to get to this, so like I said earlier, right, we couldn't do all of it in our sort of 2 weeks, but we sort of got to the point over the course of what's now been 10 or 11 months there that they can actually try to do it all in that 2 week time frame. That's just a bit of a sample of what they did and how they got there. But it started with literally those mobile first kind of designs. We put them in front of the user on the 5th day, we'd iterate on them, and then eventually this is kind of what we got to. Any questions on that? I'll just spend time here. Any questions? Kind of threw a lot of stuff that I didn't realize I'm talking a lot. Well, let me see here. Got a couple of slides, we'll just kind of wrap it up. So yeah, folks were kind of interested before, so I just thought I'd give a bit of a insight into what it is that we sort of do from an Agile advisory sort of standpoint. So the things that we typically do are sort of across here, like how we help our clients, all the way from product development, more lean thinking, some of the things that Eric Rees has done, design thinking, that sort of thing, enabling just that mentality into what they do. train and coach, so I've got development teams right now, I have 4 of them, my colleagues have a couple others, where we literally sit in those meetings and coach people on how to do everything in those 2-week sprints. Delivery model design, org design, so that's talking to your point earlier on trying to change the way that people are architected and reporting and all of that. Analytics and metrics, DevOps, which is our whole sort of technical component around how we enable speed to market initiatives, and then a whole change management sort of process to it. And this is sort of our kind of standard kind of canned approach, using our kind of piloted approach and vision approach, but the kind of core things that we do are defining what the change journey looks like, training people on it, so doing actual training on Scrum or Agile or Kanban or XP or whatever it is, then coaching them immediately following that, so they're the next day, they go to the training session and they're a newly formed Scrum team, and we sit with them all day long and kind of coach them, and then hopefully get to a point where there's some scale and they sort of run day to day on their own. Yep.
How do Canadian banks or institutions compare to what you just launched?
Yeah. Oh, from a product standpoint?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, I mean, so there's sort of 2 pieces to it. One, they're a lot more we're all naturally a little bit more risk averse here. They also don't have as competitive as an environment as they do in the US by nature of the fact that there's, I think, something like 700 banks and credit unions classified in the US type thing. It's kind of nuts because it's a very regionalized sort of marketplace, whereas in Canada we have the big 5. If you include National Bank, we have 6, which is primarily out of Quebec. So by nature of that, they're a little bit more, the desire isn't necessarily there to push the needle as much as it is in the US. Plus the US at times is a little bit more wild, wild west, depending on which client you're looking at. But with that being said, the digital aspect of what they're doing these days is becoming all the more prevalent. They are trying to reimagine their products. You've got organizations and banks like Tangerine that is really thinking digital first. There's another, and the name hasn't come to me, but there's another bank that launched not too long ago, I think a month or 2 ago, that's purely digital. Like there is no retail network at all, right? It's all cashing checks by taking pictures of them, the deposits, all of that sort of stuff is done through an app. So we're seeing it sort of change here, right? Like, the whole thing is, Canada's always like 18 months behind. You get Spotify like 4 years after the US had it. But the digital first mentality I'm seeing with a lot of what's happening in Canada. The change journey is a little bit more simplistic because they're not necessarily as large, but what we are seeing from a Canadian standpoint is you've got banks like TD that are entrenched in the US and that has been part of their expansion strategy. You've got Scotiabank that has a large Caribbean network, both from a retail and kind of a wealth management side. And so not to say that Canadian banks aren't large, but there's a lot more complexity I see in the US, which is just one of the challenges that kind of comes with it. So that's that. I didn't kind of get through everything in terms of some of the questions that came up earlier, but I realized we're also at an hour and a half mark. I want to be respectful of your time. So any other questions? I'm happy to sit and chat for like half an hour if you guys want to. I don't have to go anywhere.
Yeah, I think the informal chatting, you're going to get swamped, but that's.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So just to wrap up, how Agile plays into this process, I think I kind of covered that a little bit. I mean, it's hard to cover it in an hour and a half, but a little bit. From a project management standpoint, I think there was someone like, how do I apply my world to a project management standpoint? I didn't really touch on that, but happy to sort of chat about it, kind of one-on-one, or you can even just send you more detail by email if you're really interested. Risk and product strategy. I think I talked a little bit about that. I mean, from an Agile standpoint, we try to de-risk product development, de-risk testing, and de-risk quality, all that sort of stuff by making our work smaller and doing it piece by piece versus in a big batch world. That's one way of de-risking it. From a change standpoint, from a waterfall to an Agile standpoint, I think I kind of touched on it. It's hard to avoid the crisis, but we're big on co-creating change, allowing teams, designers to chart their own destiny and path, because the more adept to want to change, and so that's one way we try to de-risk at least early on what we do. How large Agile works, I don't think I really touched into the how. It's really complex, but I'm happy to share some stuff offline on content or anything like that if you want to learn more. A good, so first of all, one good book is Sprint, S-P-R-I-N-T, by the Google Ventures team that just got launched on Wednesday. It's how they do their design process. I would highly recommend going to read it. They also did a Medium post a year ago, last summer, on what their 5-day sprints look like. I don't know if you guys have seen that. If not, you can quickly read that. That got such traction and was so highly kind of socialized and talked about that's what led to the book. SAFE, Scaled Agile Framework, so S-A-F-E, scaledaagileframework.com, kind of pioneered by a gentleman by the name of Dean Leffingwell. Specifically to this question of how large Agile works, it's a framework that tries to address how to scale Agile. It's, in my opinion, pretty good, but it's a little prescriptive at times, but for whoever wants to know how large Agile works, go to scaledaagileframework.com. Typical problems, I talked about a few of them. There's about 1,001 problems that pop up each day. And honestly, it's really people. So had a real tough conversation yesterday with a leader that didn't want to give autonomy to his teams to make decisions. You kind of need to let the team, the people that you've trusted to do the work. He's kind of really has his hands in the day-to-day operations, and his direct report is really handcuffed in that sense, and had to have a tough conversation of like, just step away, right? Like, let him grow. He might be junior, but he's never going to learn if you don't let him grow. That's just one of the many, but a lot of times it's people-based, right? Because it's a big change, more so than the process. The process is simple to kind of do and read, but once the road hits the rubber, we're all humans and we adapt to things different ways, and that's the biggest probably thing I deal with on a daily basis. We have a joke on our team that there's always one Agile psychiatrist on the team, right? And like, we just sit in a room and just people come in and yell and scream and, and you just gotta like, woosah, just like, okay, it's gonna be all right, man, it's gonna be all right. And how it's applied in large organizations, same thing. I think scaledaagileframework.com, really quick and concise way. It's got a clickable map and you can kind of go in and learn about reading about it. Cool. Question?
Can you talk a little bit more about the Deloitte Digital?
Yeah, DD. So why don't I also pull up the page? So our digital team, while I sort of talk, this is our hiring pipeline, ironically enough. That was not by design. I don't have Wi-Fi here, do I? Is there a guest Wi-Fi? Yes. Stratford free? No.
It's not free.
Oh, it's not free? Which one should I go to?
Try the first Stratford free.
No.
I thought it was down.
It's not free.
It is.
This one?
It just doesn't work.
Just doesn't work. Well, I can pull up the site and show you like our Octane opportunities, but you can kind of go to Deloitte Digital Canada. It should all be there. But so DD, so our digital team basically, so like I said, clients kind of come to us and say, we don't have a good expertise on like design, like doing design thinking, and we don't have an in-house capability on UX and visual designers. You see a lot of it too because organizations, big ones, are treating the web seriously now, and it sounds ridiculous, right? Because it's like it's 2015. It's really like this is just the first time you're actually taking your mobile app seriously, or you don't even have a mobile app still. It's like all true, right? They move slow, right? So they'll say, okay, we want to redo this site, or we want to redo whatever it is. And they'll engage us, and we'll staff people, not to do what Paul does, where he coaches teams through and figures out org models, but where we actually code and design and do all that fun stuff. Typical, engagements are structured around anything digital, obviously, so mobile, social, web. Typically, our Canadian firm has a large amount of our clients are financial services by nature of just what we do from a Deloitte standpoint. So I think our split of like revenue is like something like 60% FSI, so that's insurance companies and all that sort of thing. So you'll generally be working with a lot of financial service kind of companies in the space that we play in. So having a little bit of that background is always a little bit beneficial. Like with these designs, from an account summary standpoint, it's kind of easy because we all go on our account summary page and we kind of know it, but there's sometimes more complex things. And your engagements typically last, it can be anywhere from 4 weeks, like a short little design challenge, to some folks, upwards of 6, sort of 7 months on a client. And our digital, we just moved into a brand new office in Toronto. So we had like 8 offices and we aggregated them all to one on Adelaide. So our digital team sits in there now with the rest of our firm. If I pull up the site, I can show you the rest of the stuff, but that's just kind of it in an elevator pitch, I guess.
Adelaide and what?
Adelaide and Bay. So it's called the Bay Adelaide Tower, but it's on Adelaide and Yonge, just next, and it's like right next to Bay.
That's my favorite part of Toronto.
Yeah, it's a good one. So we're right next to KPMG. We basically built the same tower as they did, sort of thing. Does that answer your question? Is that right? Follow on? Not really.
Sure.
Oh, let's go. What did I answer? No.
Oh no, like what you mentioned earlier when we were going around and asking it's like a lot of us, I guess, we're looking for job opportunities once we finish the program.
Yep.
So being able to get in touch with you or anybody else who's more connected to the Deloitte digital team.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, so you can certainly get in touch with me. Our work kind of overlaps, so I have a good relationship with our DD team. The opportunities are online. It's growing extremely fast. Our partner, his name's Gord Sanford, that runs our digital practice, has actually full-time moved out of his previous role, which was technology strategy, of which Deloitte Digital was a portion, to dedicate full-time to it. So there's a lot of growth and opportunity, and sort of can't hire fast enough in that space. So you can certainly reach out to me, and I can kind of get you in contact with the right folks. Our site's got the sort of latest and greatest on it. And if you just kind of want to know more, you can let me know. I spent, last year from May to June, I spent 6 months training our digital team in the US on Agile, because a lot of our clients are asking for it more, so when we go in, we have to be a little bit more sharper equipped. So I spent a bunch of time in the US. If anyone's American or has an interest in the US, I can put you in touch with our team down there. They're growing extremely fast there. We just opened up a new DD studio in downtown Manhattan. We just acquired a company called Heat in San Francisco last week. That will be the basis of our San Fran office type thing. So there's a lot of opportunities in the US. Seattle, San Fran, Austin, and New York, and Denver. The DD team are kind of anti-consulting, they're very different. Literally there's dogs in the office and kegs of beer. And foosball tables and Xbox, it's the coolest place ever. We don't have that in Toronto right now. We don't have an office like that, and we didn't do it as part of our design. But if you are interested in the US, there's that play too. They're big on having you live in one of those cities because they want you to, the whole one team mentality, and sit and nurture with them. So if any of those cities are of interest to you, let me know. Anything else? Good?
We'll move into the informal part.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Paul, thank you for a very dynamic, interesting, informative talk. I see it's not often I can sit for an hour and a half and actually be totally enthralled with a talk, and it was absolutely really useful. I think you're going to find a lot of people asking you a little bit more information.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks very much.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for